Awesome. Hi everyone, and welcome to our AMS session on building inclusive and thriving open source communities. I am Phylis Atieno, and I lead developer ecosystem at Chimani. And I'm excited to host you today as part of our Hacktoberfest 2025 sessions. So over the next hour, we'll be diving into open source contributions, building inclusive communities, and how open source can support career growth. So before we start, I just want to highlight that Chimani has open source projects open to contributors and is actively participating in Oktoberfest currently. So you can check them out and contribute as well. Now, moving back into this session, the session is meant to be interactive, so we encourage you to submit questions via the chat, and towards the end, we'll answer as many as possible and also discuss questions submitted by our community members in advance. And now let me introduce to you our amazing guests of today. We have Anita Ihuman, Program Manager at Open Kids Africa, and she is an experienced developer advocate. She has been deeply involved in open source communities for years and has been leading diversity and inclusion initiatives at Chaos, and has also supported developers through advocacy roles. She's also a skilled technical writer and also creates content to educate open source contributors or people in the open source ecosystem globally. So, welcome, Anita.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
You're welcome. Next, we have Tilda Udufo. She is an outreach organizer at the Software Freedom Conservancy. She also has an impressive background in open source. She's coordinated coding communities before at Public Lab and also mentored multiple Outreach and Google Sum of Code cohorts. She has also worked as a software engineer at Deimos and contributed as an open source fellow in LMLH Fellowship, right? So welcome Tilda as well.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Now to kick things off, I would like to welcome each of you to share a brief introduction, a little about your journey in open source and what you're currently working on. So let's start with you, Anita.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. All right. Recently I was doing a rundown through like memory lane, and I saw when and exactly how I started my contributions to open source, and it was really amazing to see how far the journey has been. Back in 2020, I know we have seen this before. Every single time She Code Africa hosts like hackathons and lots of programs to encourage open source contributions, and She Code Africa along with other communities similar, right? But in 2020, I had just got out of school and I was learning front end development, and someone sent me a post about the um, it was around June, but like there was a contributor program to get people to contribute or make as many first time pull requests as they could, and there were prizes to be won. And I was actually excited about the prizes that were listed out, but I was also new to open source, so I wasn't putting my hopes too high. And some of the communities that I found interesting at the time was Layer 5 and Chaos. And when I joined the communities, I'm not going to lie, I was overwhelmed by the amount of information, right? But I eventually made my first pull request, which took a very long time. But before then, I was able to like do other contributions in the community, like creating issues and then sharing it with people within my network. And that was like significant because it just made me realize that I could also help other people get into open source by sharing the knowledge that I had, regardless of how little it was. So I just kept showing up in the community and asking lots of questions, also volunteering where the need arises. And I think the journey just went from that to, and eventually I was recognized as a community manager within the Layer 5 community, right? And I moved into like Chaos project as well with a similar career path. And since then, I have moved from doing front end development to working in community management, developer relations, program management, writing code base. I also transitioned from front end to like more on cloud and DevOps. So like all of this, I think was because of that singular moment when I decided that I was going to participate in the contributor program and made my first pull request to like created my first set of issues and made my first pull request to the community. So I think in summary, that's how my journey within open source has been up to this moment.
Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing, Anita. Your journey is pretty impressive, by the way. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we're going to cover that as we move ahead with the session. Tilda, would you go next?
All right. So I learned about open source when I found out about Outreachy. So before I found out about Outreachy, I had heard of open source, but I wasn't. It felt like it wasn't for me because I had this idea in my mind that only smart people could contribute to open source, and I did not think I had the skills at the time to contribute to open source. So when I found out about Outreachy, and I learned that it involved contributing to open source, I knew I had to actually know what this open source was all about. So I started to do my research about how I could contribute, what skills I needed. And I basically started to prepare myself ahead of the Outreachy application phase. And my very first contribution, open source contribution, was to Mozilla at the time. And I remember it took me about 3 to 4 months just to contribute to a singular thing on the code base. And it was a real learning curve because I wasn't used to any of the tools that I was using at the time to contribute to Mozilla. So it felt like I was really starting from scratch. And there were times when I wanted to just pause. It's not when I wanted to. I actually did stop at some point because I felt so, it was so challenging. And I felt like I just did not know enough to continue to contribute to this particular issue. And I stopped for a while. And I remember the mentor who was in charge of that issue I was contributing to reached out to me a couple of days later when he noticed that I had been silent for a very long time and was like, hey, do you need any help with this? Tell me, what do you need? And that singular moment of care from that particular person was enough to just reignite that um, enthusiasm for me to continue making the contribution. So I told him, okay, these are the issues I'm having. This is where I need help, and he guided me through the entire thing. And I remember finally completing that first contribution, and my patch was accepted, and I felt so happy because Mozilla is something it's like this huge community, this huge organization that I was aware of. So the fact that I could make a contribution to an organization that large through open source, and that the change that I had made would be used by so many people, so many users, was mind blowing to me. I felt so excited and happy that I was able to do that. And I think it just ignited this passion for open source for me. And I just went into the outreachy contribution stage or application phase with so much zeal to make contributions, and not just make contributions, to also help other people to make contributions. And it was during that contribution phase that I started to do things like create issues for other people to work on, assist people by maybe answering questions or helping them make their own contributions as well. I just wanted to help as much as I could. So I went from being someone who just wanted to contribute code to someone who wanted to help other people contribute to open source. And yeah, that was what kicked things off for my the community work that I now do in open source. And at the time, it wasn't a very conscious thing that I was doing community work, because in my head, I'm like, I only want to write code. I only know how to write code. Anything that has to do with people and community, I don't think I can do it. But the amazing thing about open source is the fact that it comes with the territory of open source, that community and that people. And it was just something I started doing without intentionally trying to do it. And that has made it has made such a positive impact on my career in general. I no longer see myself as just someone who wants to contribute code. I know that there's so much more I can do within these open source communities. And once I transitioned from being a contributor, I had a wonderful community that surrounded me, that made it possible for me to transition from not just being a contributor to also someone who mentors, who maintains, who is also a leader. So yeah, that was how my journey in open source started. And now, if I had to tell you what I am currently working on, if you had asked me a couple of years ago, I would have told you, oh, I am just a software engineer. But now I know that I am so much more because of these open source communities that I have been a part of. And I know that there are so many more roles in the open source space that I can take on because I've had wonderful people in these communities that have supported me in finding out what my other strengths are. And yeah, that would basically be the summary of my journey.
Awesome, awesome. And so I know from what all of you have shared, you had that starting point, and I believe at that starting point, maybe you had questions like, how do I start? And how do I know I'm going to make a meaningful impact? Tilda, you've mentioned how you had some of those questions, and just by Tina reaching out to help you, you actually moved from that phase. Anita, I don't know if you had like these issues while starting as well. Sorry, and were there any challenges you faced before you actually figured out how to contribute, and even during the contribution phase, and how did you navigate them as a new contributor?
Okay. Thank you for that question. So when I started my open source contributions, I had several challenges because, like I said, I was new to tech entirely, coming from like a microbiology background. So I had to like figure out how tech worked, and I had barely gotten a hang of what Git and GitHub was. That was the biggest challenge that I had. So I had to figure out what Git was, how Git works. Some of the commands were like so challenging. I had like a notebook where I always copy the command whenever I want to make a minor pull request, because I knew that I could, like, I deleted some of the forked repositories like 5 to 10 times just because my pull request kept getting errors. And like anytime they left a comment that I need to refix something, I didn't know how to like use Git to, just do that automatically. So I'll delete the repository entirely and then fuck the whole process and start it all over again. It was really chaotic, to be honest. And it took about a couple of weeks before I got a hang of how to make the first pull request. And also, another challenge was like understanding how the open source system works, because I had not gotten used to like collaborating with like people in an open space before. So it was something entirely new to me, and I had to like just wrap my head around it, know how to communicate with people, know how to ask questions without feeling like my voice would not be heard. And I think a challenge that most beginners tend to experience is you're scared that if you ask a question, it might come out of like it's a very stupid question, or it is not significant. However, because I would like to say it's justified that you ask those questions, because everyone understands that you're new to the space. This is something that you've not experienced before. And communities often have a way of making you feel welcome to, share your opinion and do all of the contributions that you actually want to do. So I was also very intimidated by like unmuting myself in the community and asking questions. So oftentimes I'd wait till after the meeting is concluded, and I'll reach out to people individually and say, you were talking about this and I thought it was interesting. I'd like to contribute. How can I help? And I could have done that within the call, but like I said, I was really intimidated by the sheer experience of being in an open space and working with people that I knew had way more experience than myself. And so that was like some of the challenges that I experienced. And over time, I noticed that some of the communities, right, provided individuals that were there to readily help. So that solved the issue of feeling intimidated to like air your opinions or ask questions or ask for help. So like I had peer mentors that I would reach out to whenever I had challenges. And in terms of like the Git and GitHub um, learning gap that I had, I just took a lot of classes. I know there was like a certification, a training program that GitLab did at the time to get people to familiarize with like Git and GitHub. People were getting into open source for the first time. So I took part in that program and got the certification afterwards. And that helped me, understand how to make a pull request without having any issues. And then I also got a hang of like collaborating with other people by just showing up every day and seeing how other people were comfortable doing the same thing that I wanted to do. So those were the areas that I had most challenge, and that's how I was able to like walk around it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I believe that's so helpful for new contributors who might be in the audience. So thank you so much. And for both of you, I know you've both been in the contributors and the maintainer end. So looking at where you've been at in both ends, let's say someone who's new, they want to contribute to a project, they don't know where to start, they don't know how to figure out the best project to contribute to. What are the strategies that you would say helped you, or that you've seen as a maintainer that can help them identify beginner friendly projects that can truly support their growth? As you've mentioned, when they have issues, they can feel supported in the community. What are some of those pointers that they can look for while looking for communities or open source projects to contribute to? We'll start with you, Tilda.
So a very important thing that good open source projects need to have is that they need to make it clear that they want contributors, and it starts by first projects need to be able to label that these are beginner issues. They need to have active discussions, and it is very, very important that they use inclusive language in that documentation, because if there are barriers to entry in the project, it's going to be very difficult for someone who is completely new to open source to even contribute in the first place. And these things start from the first point of entry: documentation, the discussions. Are there forums available for contributors to come in, and maybe they're having issues with setting up the project or they need help? Are there forums available for them to, come and ask for help? And the tone of a community is also important, and you can feel this by how they respond to questions on these forums, or let's say they're using GitHub issues. They need to be Mentors, maintainers need to be very patient and intentional. They are not just there to review your code and move on, they're also there to help you understand and guide you through it, and that requires a lot of patience and intentionality. I remember the example I gave about my very first contribution. If the mentor had not been patient with me and guided me through the entire process, it would have been very difficult for me to make that first contribution. In fact, I probably would have just given up on the contribution halfway. And if nobody had followed up, that would have been the end of my open source exploration, and I probably would have never gotten into open source. So all these things, communication, intentionality, patience, are very, very important for projects that want to have beginners contribute to them. And it goes a long way in leaving that impression in someone who is new to open source, because I remember when I first started, I came in with a lot of fear about, oh, what if the contribution I'm making is not the best? What if I constantly make mistakes? What if I'm not doing well enough? And the thing about open source is it's in the open, everyone can see what it is that you are doing. And that can evoke a certain level of fear in a beginner's mind, because everyone can see what you are doing, everyone can see when you're making mistakes. So it is very important that the maintainers, the reviewers, the mentors, anyone who is involved with having contacts with newcomers to open source, it is very important that they are very intentional and patient with their approach to new contributors. So, in summary, how can new contributors identify beginner-friendly projects? Good projects will make it clear that they want contributors. They are going to label their issues, maybe good first issues, or they are going to have active discussions, and it is going to be very clear from the way they communicate on every single one of their forums that they want you to contribute. So those are some things that you can look out for.
Awesome. So clarity in communication, intentionality. So you have to look out for this as an open source contributor. Awesome. Thank you so much. Anita, do you have some pointers as well?
So I just want to like talk on what Tilda said, and all of the points that she said are spot on. So aside all of these things, right, you can also know a community is willing to accommodate beginners based on how they document the beginner journey, or like map out what the beginner experience from the first time they come across the project to what happens to them moving forward. And you can find this in if a project or a community has have to contribute section in their documentation, or if the project repository has um, getting making of like a how to guide on how to contribute, or like contributing .md, like most of these documents, right, they're very little resources, but like it also shows that the community has a premeditated thought that we're going to be expecting people who have very little to no idea about our project, and we need to help them get started, right? So watch out for all of this in any community that you come across, checking their repositories. Do they have a mapped out readme that also like is very welcoming, but also self-explanatory, that you don't have to like get external support before you understand what is detailed down there. All of these things will give you a hint that this place might not be as scary as I think or I imagine it to be.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, and so we've gotten clear communication. That's what is cutting across all of your views. So is the project clear enough that they are accepting contributions? Are they clear on how you can get started? Are they clear on how you can get to them if you need help? So awesome. I believe that helps anyone who may be listening. Now, moving into now the community side of things. Once you're in a community, and I believe this applies to maintainers or people now building the community, the there is the focus of creating spaces where everyone feels welcome. So, in order to do this, maintainers or community managers may aim for um, focusing on the culture, the accessibility. From your experience leading and maintaining communities, how can you define true inclusivity in open source? Because maintainers might say, or community managers might say they are inclusive, but how do you actually determine that the community is inclusive? Or how do you, Tilda or Anita, actually aim for inclusivity in the projects that you lead or manage?
So from my experience, yesterday I was in. Yeah, let me just deviate a bit. I was in a bread of feather session yesterday, and one of the things that I said, and I didn't think much about it, but like when we talk about like diversity, we're talking about the number of people that are not in the room and not the people that are actually like we're talking about the people that are not included in the particular room. But inclusivity, I would say, is not about just getting those people in the room, but it's about making them feel or like they count among the people that are in the room. So sometimes you could have a community that has the you see the demographics, the they have 20% of underrepresented people or 30% of underrepresented people, but like when it comes to actual or actionable efforts within the community, these people are not represented in those particular areas. So I'd say inclusivity for me is about ensuring that diverse individuals within the community are present, they're represented, they're heard, and their unique perspectives and way of working is also accepted within the community. And also when they have ideas or suggestions, not the community does not dismiss it because it doesn't align, but like looks for ways to integrate those ideas or like drive for better growth, right? And one of the things that shows is inclusive spaces often have higher chances and prospects of innovation. So you projects often don't look at it from this part of things, but like in daily practice, right? Inclusivity for me is just the non-traditional ways of having these changes, accommodating people and their differences. You're building an application, for instance, and there are people within your team, and you're talking about how do we make this project more accessible and all of that. There are underrepresented people who are probably suffering with disabilities on your team that you could have on that particular team of developers for the application. And why am I saying you should have them on the team? Because if you're driving for accessibility and a more um a more sustainable and innovative tool, you'd want to put into consideration the needs of not just people that are able, but also people that are disabled as well, because there's a good percentage of the world's population that are disabled that could also use that tool, and you're missing out on all of those numbers. I'm talking about if you're building or like putting together a leadership team, and there are people within your community that are doing great effort, but because they probably have the language barrier, you have not seen ways to recognize their efforts in positions of leadership. Then inclusivity for me will be considering those people not just because of their differences, but because of their unique ideas and perspective that they're also bringing on the board for that particular discussion. And just finding a way to make sure that every contributor feels like they genuinely belong, and they actually, their contributions also are regarded as much as contributions from any other person within the community.
Thank you so much, Anita. I think one thing I've learned is not just including the diverse people because they're diverse, but because of the unique contributions they actually bring, which is a great gem. Thank you so much, Anita. Um, Tilda, do you have any view on this?
I completely agree with all of the points Anita has made. And just to give an example of the leadership points that Anita touched on, when I started contributing to Public Lab, which was, I think, the second community I contributed to, they had this system where they weren't just encouraging contributors to contribute code, but they were also actively encouraging us to also help other people within the community. Now, the thing about that particular arrangement was it was during the outreach contribution stage, and if anyone has been through the outreach contribution stage, it can be a bit intense and it can get competitive. But Public Lab promoted collaboration over competitiveness, and they encouraged their contributors to actually help other people, and that played such a huge role in how I approached other communities moving forward. And so when I actually started my internship with Public Lab, I was already making efforts to do more than just contributing. I was making efforts to, learn how to be a leader in that particular community and to be a leader in open source. So when an opportunity came for me to mentor with Public Lab and also be a code community coordinator, it wasn't difficult for me to envision myself doing that, because in a way my mentors at the time had already started to train me and guide me to become more than just a contributor and to like create pathways for me to become a leader in that particular community. So inclusivity, like Anita said, goes beyond just representation. Representation is just the starting point. True inclusion is what happens after people arrive. Do they feel heard? Do they feel supported? Are they empowered to grow? So you're not just opening the door, but we are also making sure that people have what they need to stay and also grow at the same time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. To be honest, I'm getting gems upon gems. I'm taking notes, but I'm also learning, and I'm so excited for people who are listening to this and are getting to learn from you guys. So, um, there are bound to be challenges in any open source community. And I can say currently, while managing contributions, there are challenges, but at least I'm finding a way to navigate them. So, obviously, like when people want to contribute, let's say a task is restricted for someone who had initially asked for it, and then someone else wants it, and then they feel like, okay, they're not valued and all that. So they're bound to be, this just shows they're bound to be issues, and not only in the current contribution period, but also like while collaborating generally as a community. What are the issues you guys have faced in your communities, and how have you kind of navigated them as well? Anita, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So for like a project maintainer, some of the challenges you're most likely going to like have to deal with is the time difference and communication barrier. And I think I'm saying from a project maintenance perspective, but like even from a contributor's point of view, that is a very huge, those are like two very huge issues that so many persons still experience and have today. Because sometimes you're in a community and the time difference between you and the maintainer who is supposed to like reply to your pull request is like 5 to 10 hours apart. And you know this in like anxiousness that comes with making a pull request, that you're so worried whether or not they're going to reject it. And imagine having to like spend 10 to 12 hours waiting for the person to reply, but then when they come online, they're not going to like first of all rush to your project, because like there's a pile of other issues similar to yours that have been waiting for this person. So like as a result of that time difference, you might not be getting, first hand response from people, and it can be discouraging for a lot of contributors, because they feel like, oh, the community is taking way longer to reply or attend to me. But like it could just be that the maintainers are not working within like the time zone, or like the same hours that you are. So why you're like, why is daytime on your end, it's like night hours on theirs, and they have to like manage to accommodate that. And it also affects the contributors in terms of like meetings, because sometimes you see that a contributor wants to make impact, right? But then the meeting hours within their time is like 12 a.m. And um they don't know how to manage it. I know as a beginner, one of the issues I struggled with is I was always up late trying to join meetings, and it was so like exhausting, because sometimes I ended up burnt out because I'm trying to like catch up with meetings that take place by 12, and then there's another one by 7 a.m. And it was really just a lot to like toggle with at first. But eventually, I expressed these concerns to the community, and we're able to like look for a way to accommodate those the meeting hour issue as well. And then you can also look at some other challenges like the communication barrier, where there's someone who wants to make contributions to the community, but they're not like English native, like they're not native English speakers. And as a community maintainer, you also have to like look for ways to accommodate them. Or like the issues where you're a maintainer and there are like three different people struggling for a singular issue that is available, and you know fully well that at the end of the day this issue might end up being assigned to just one person. So like you're trying to be objective with your decision making at that particular point. It's a first come first serve situation, and then you're worried whether or not the other maintainers will feel like their opinions or like they were not heard because you overlooked their comments. And sometimes that's not just the case. The first how I handled it within my communities is the first person to make a comment about an issue is the first person that gets it. But some maintainers may not know how to like manage situations like this. So like there's so many challenges, but like top of my head, this is the most that I can actually remember at the moment.
Thank you so much. Interestingly, those are the same challenges that I experience right now. So thank you so much on sharing how to navigate them. Tilda, do you have anything to add upon that?
I think one other challenge that mentors or maintainers might face is also burnout. I remember the first time I started mentoring for GSOC and Outreachy. I wanted to do so much, and there were so many people who wanted to contribute, and everyone wanted to work on an issue, and I was doing my best to try to help everyone and attend to everyone. And I started to notice that I felt exhausted at the end of every day. And the thing about burnout is it's also reduces the amount that you can do for other people. But at the time I didn't recognize that, oh, I was actually burnt out and that I was doing too much at the time. And there's also this sense of guilt that came to me at the time, like, oh, I'm not able to help every single person that was coming to me to ask for an issue, for something to work on, because I genuinely wanted to help everyone. But at the same time, it's a very small team of maintainers, and you just have to do the best you can. So, mental burnout is something that is very, very real and that affects a lot of maintainers and mentors. And I think at the time, it was very important for me to be honest with my other co mentors and co maintainers at the time, to be like, I think I am juggling a lot and I'm doing too much. And I think I might have to limit the amount of time that I dedicate to this, and to just create processes that allow me to still help or guide new contributors, but at the same time help me protect my mental health or physical state as well. So we came up with strategies and processes. How do we reduce the amount of how do we reduce mental burnout or the likelihood of mental burnout? And we would come up with processes. For example, we would have contributors come to us with usually the same questions over and over again. And you find yourself having to repeat yourself to one, two, three contributors. So at the time we sat down and said, okay, what are all of the common questions we get from contributors? And we gathered them and had pre-planned answers to each one, so that it reduces the amount of time for us to kind of think of, okay, how do we respond to this? Or the amount of time that we used to copy and paste from one contributor's the reply we gave to one contributor to another one. So having pre-planned answers for or processes for some of those things that we know comes up often in the communities. And we also encouraged our applicants or contributors to help themselves. And so things like, oh, I think maybe you've been in the community for a while more than somebody else. Is there a way you can help this other person? Maybe answering simple questions, helping out in the general community forum. This is how you kind of get people to engage. At the same time, help prevent mentors from being burnt out. So I think creating an open space for mentors and maintainers to be able to say, okay, I think I'm having to juggle a lot. What can be done about this is very, very important in an open source community, so that mentors, maintainers, reviewers, everyone involved can be honest with what they are having to juggle at the time.
Thank you so much, Tilda. So just to summarize the part, the different challenges that maintainers face. So the time difference, the load that comes from it, and that load now leads to burnout. And how do you try mitigate that burnout? So just have pre-planned processes, pre-planned answers for questions or issues you might receive. Thank you so much for that. Very insightful. Now, moving to the last segment before we now get into the questions. open source doesn't just benefit projects, right? It doesn't only benefit the communities that create the projects. It can shape careers in unexpected ways. And I can say I am a true example of that. So, the skills, networks, and experiences that you gain from contributing to a project often are transferable across roles and industries. So I would just like to hear from you. How has contributing to or maintaining open source projects influenced your professional journeys? Anita?
Okay, so when I started, I did mention that I was a front end developer, very new to tech, transitioning from microbiology. So I started off as a front end developer, learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React, and the likes of it, right? But my first open source contribution was to a cloud native project, and they're building this tool, Meshery, that is like a management plane for cloud native tools. And I had zero idea of what all of this was at the time I joined this community. But because I had like my skills as a front end developer, I was able to like improve on the website. And then I also had like writing skills. So I was writing and improving on the documentation, helping with the community, and also helping with the website. But over time, I picked interest in cloud computing and DevOps because of my contributions to that project. And I started contributing from that point to the project itself, along with like other cloud native project that I came across. And so that piqued my interest, and I started learning. Like I took courses on cloud computing and DevOps. And so now I don't even do any front end contributions to projects, but I do a lot more work as a developer relations around cloud native toolings and DevOps solutions, writing of articles, speaking at conferences. And that also like is a bulk load of it. Recently I got recognized as a CNCF ambassador for like the cloud native community foundation. And it's made me
Congratulations.
really happy because it was like a good acknowledgement that the years of contributions over time did pay off, and the community does appreciate all of that. And outside of like the journey in like my learning and moving from front end to cloud base, I also moved from like a beginner with zero idea of open source, and today I am leading a lot of like projects and communities, right? Doing great work as um, someone on the leading board for like chaos, and also a board for like so many other open source projects. And this comes with a lot of responsibility. Sometimes I think about it, I'm like, 5 years ago I probably would have not imagined that I would be in positions like this, leading communities of like people who are way older than myself, or like with years of experience. But like I am in this situation today because of like the sheer decision to make my first pull request to like open source. And so like it has influenced also in the aspect of my networking, in the sense that every single project that I join, I am very excited because I'm meeting a new group of people that could change multiple things about my career prospect. I could meet someone today and tomorrow I'm collaborating with them on a project around AI, or I meet someone tomorrow and I'm working with them on a research project. Like all of these things have happened, all of these things are still happening. But like every single time I'm in a new open source project, I just know that there's prospect to, network and do something bigger than I am currently doing and make more impact in the process. So like there's so much that I could point to the influence of open source on my journey. But like I think this is a good highlight so far.
Awesome. I'm glad you've had such a pretty positive experience to it. Tilda, would you like to share how your experience has been?
Yes. So I started my career with open source. My very first professional experience was with open source. So open source completely changed the trajectory of my life because and my career. I started as a contributor and as someone who had imposter syndrome, who didn't feel confident in her skills. But because of open source, I have discovered so many strengths that I have, and I have discovered so much about myself, and it has completely shaped my entire career. And it goes beyond just the technical skills that I've gained. It's also learning how to read large code bases or contribute across different stacks. I've learned how to communicate because open source requires working in the open, and it is very important that your communication skills are good because you are communicating with people from different backgrounds that speak different languages than you do. So communication is very, very important because open source forces you to kind of articulate your ideas clearly, and it also helps you to handle getting feedback gracefully as well. So all of these things are things that I learned because of open source. I have learned how to work better with people that I have never met before. There are so many people I have worked with in open source that I have never met, and I don't know if I will. But still, I was able to work with these people so well because that is what open source teaches you how to do. It teaches you how to communicate, it teaches you empathy, and it teaches you leadership skills as well. And the thing about these skills is it is transferable among so many other jobs that or roles that you decide to do. You could be a developer advocate, a software engineer, a team lead, a manager, and all of these skills are still very important. And that is the foundation of open source. And it goes beyond just the technical skills. There's so much more that I have learned from contributing to open source. And I think one other thing that open source has given me is that there are so many things that I could do. I started out in tech thinking, oh, code is the only thing I can do because I'm very introverted. And I felt like I just want to be in a role where I only had to write code and interaction with people was kept to a minimum. I just want to write code. And that was how I started off at first. But then I joined open source and I joined amazing communities, met amazing people that made me realize that there's so much more to me than just contributing code. There's so much more I can do. And since then, I have mentored, I have organized communities, led communities, and still kept up with the technical work that I enjoy or love doing. So that is one thing that I really really appreciate about my journey in open source, that there's so many things, so many strengths, and it has given me the confidence to try new things as well, because there's a certain vulnerability that is required to contribute to open source. For example, you're starting out a new you want to contribute to a new project, you kind of have to accept that I do not know anything about this project and I am completely starting from scratch, and that it might be obvious to people that I don't know anything about this project, and that's okay. So a certain level of vulnerability is required to contribute to open source, and this applies to anything in life. When you want to try something new, there's a possibility that it might not go as well as you want it to on your first try, but you do anyway. And that is something that open source has given me the confidence to try new things and to explore and not to limit myself to only the things that I do know. So yeah, there's so many things I could talk about when it comes to what I've gained from open source, but I will highlight those ones for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Um, so there's been a lot of learning skills beyond what you even thought you were going to contribute to. Um, And so I believe there might be someone who's watching and is very interested in contributing to open source, hoping maybe they can turn it into an involvement in a fellowship, a job, speaking engagements, leadership roles. Is there any advice you'd give them? Because I believe that for you for you guys, you might have joined in, like really interested in contributing, and then in some way, because of the opportunities that you were given within these communities, you kind of gained this leadership skills out of it, but there might be someone who is just aiming for what they can get out of it, which is pretty valid, by the way. So for someone who's getting into it with that mindset or with that view, what advice would you give them to actually help them get out get out what they want to get out of the contribution they're doing? Anita?
Oh, sorry, I forgot I was muted. So, I know so many persons today are preaching open source as an automatic gateway to, you know, building on your skill sets and landing your first job, which in reality, it's not a lie, but it's not a magic potion to, or like a get a job's quick scheme. To be honest, it takes a lot of like consistency. It takes a lot of showing up, not just showing up, but like intentionally showing up. Sometimes you're in a community and you feel like, oh, I just need to make my pull request and go home. Like building, if you're looking to make impact, you're not just going to need, you don't need to like just show up and make a pull request and go home. There's so many other things that are happening outside of that singular pull request that your skill sets could be relevant in. But if you don't hang around, you might never really find out. So when you come across a project, avoid the urge to just make a pull request and then like shy away from the community completely. And I'm saying this because so many people tell me, oh, I made my first attempt at contributing to pull request, but I didn't continue, and I didn't benefit anything from it at the end of the day. It's not a magic potion that just happens overnight. So many persons have been in the process for like months. Some people take years before they're able to like say, oh, I benefited from open source. So like it might not take that long for you, but also it will require a lot of intentionality towards making the impact, or like either the impact in yourself or the impact in the community or in the impact in your career as a whole. Whatever impact it is, wherever you're looking to make impact in, it to make a lot of intentionality of showing up, being empathetic in when collaborating with other people, and also figuring out ways to like contribute beyond just yourself, like yourself making a pull request to a project. Look for other people that you can also help at some point. There's a beginner that does not know how to use Git or GitHub, and so because of that, they don't know how to contribute to open source. You that knows how to use Git and GitHub, you can volunteer to help that person, and that singular effort is going to change somebody else's idea of what open source is like. And just like Tilda's experience, right, it was somebody else within the community that gave her the boost so that she can still show up. And so you can be that person, and whatever it is that you feel you have zero or little to no idea on, there are also other people in the community that can support and help you if you just reached out and asked. And if you don't get a response the first time, do not feel discouraged to still show up and still ask either way. And no question is dumb, no question is stupid. It's okay to be a beginner. As a beginner, you shouldn't even feel embarrassed to be a beginner, because like it's something you might not experience again from that point on in the community. And some of the things that you're supposed to learn, some of the questions that you're supposed to bring to the table to challenge the community's processes that are not favoring beginners, right? You might not have the experience to do that again if you don't air it at that particular point by showing up. So try to show up when you can, ask questions, make your suggestions, and do not feel like it is not recognized or it may not be acknowledged by the community.
Thank you so much. I had something to say, but I'll let Tilda go first.
I actually don't have a lot to add to what Anita has said. I think she pretty much hits all of the main points about that. It's not a wrong thing to have goals when you contribute to open source. For example, you might be looking to transition from one stack to another and you think open source is good. That is nice. It's good to have goals, but do not forget that there are other things you could do within the community beyond just what you set out to do. And it is when you allow yourself to consider other opportunities that these opportunities will be available to you. So yeah, that's just the short thing I have to add.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now I can see we have 3 minutes. And so I don't believe we'll be able to check any questions on the chat. So I had asked some of our community members to just share with me questions they would love for you to answer to. And so I had three. So I'm going to try very much to just summarize them, and then you can just let me know your answers. You can just share what you think about those questions or your answers to them, and then we can wrap it up just for the sake of time. So we had received questions on someone wanted to know how can I highlight my open source contributions on my resume, portfolio, or LinkedIn. And also we received another question on I'm not a developer. How can I effectively contribute to open source in other ways? And the last one was for someone who wants to start a project and wants people to contribute to it, how can how can I have people contribute to it? If you have any thoughts on that. If you need me to repeat these questions at any point, I know there are three and they might all need different answers. So yeah, those are the questions we received. If you don't mind, you can just spend some time answering them and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, so to the first question, how can you make your open source contributions reflect in your resume? I'd like you to know that lots of times employers are looking for ways that you have made impact with the skill sets that you're saying you have. And so making a singular pull request in open source might be a significant thing to highlight in your resume. However, you might want to also highlight how that singular pull request made an impact to the project in one way or another. And so this brings me back to the topic of like being consistent and showing up. While you're doing all of these things within open source every single day, always go back to your resume to highlight some of the things that are really impactful. Like let's say you changed a particular button and then a user of that particular project saved a lot of money, like from the issues that could have arisen, come up from that particular issue. That's a good thing to highlight. And also, so many persons feel like their open source contributions are not significant enough to highlight in their resume, but like just knowing how to reward it and knowing how to word your content so that it spotlights the impact of that contribution, either in numbers or the impact in the significance in the life in the user's experience, whatsoever it is that you did. Just communicating that effectively would help. Can you go over the second question again?
Sure. So the second question was, I am not a developer, but I still want to contribute to open source. What meaningful ways can I contribute?
All right, so there are a million ways you could contribute to open source without writing code. And I talked about how I started writing articles and documentation and creating issues for other people to contribute, promoting the community across my social media so that other people could contribute. Now, these things may seem like basic and very insignificant to a normal person, but like those were ways that I started off like making contributions as someone who had very little knowledge of like the technical things within that community. And so if you're somebody like this and maybe you know how to write, go on and write articles about that project or that community, or you know how to like work with documentation, check the project documentation and update it. Are you a designer? Some of these open source projects have very not pleasant UI that need to be improved. You can also volunteer to do that, to be the brand designer for that project. That would be really helpful. Are you someone who is into data science or something? You can also try to help the project with their metrics and their data, and trying to make sure that all of these things are available and also accessible or properly documented. Are you someone who is more on the relational aspect? You know how to talk to people, you know how to help other people. You can decide to be a community manager in that project, onboarding other people and sharing resources with people, whatever it is you want to do, that is within your skill set. You don't have to, reinvent the wheel to do something. There are people that are already doing it. I have a YouTube, um, you know, um, thread where I have curated a couple of persons doing abstract things in open source that are far from just writing code. I'm talking about data security, biological health, and all of those things. Right? You could think of in open source. So like, there's so many ways you could do that in open source that don't have to like involve writing of code at the end of the day. Yeah, I think I also forgot the third question, but I think Tita would like to like chime in as well.
Yeah, sure, sure. Tilda, do you want me to go over the questions again? Hi, Tilda. Oops, we may have lost Tilda. Tilda, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, can you repeat the last question?
Yeah, the last question was, what advice would you give to someone who wants to start a project but isn't sure if people will join or contribute?
So, I think one important thing that might people kind of underestimate or underrate is visibility. Sometimes talking about your work in public is what makes people interested in what you are doing or what you are building, the open source projects that you're trying to build. So don't be afraid to share or work in the open. It could be choose whatever platform you think you prefer or want to talk about your work on. Talk to people about what you are doing. Why are you doing what you are doing? Let people become interested in the work that you are doing. And you never know. It's one person who randomly saw your post on their feed, or who is someone who is already a connection, or anyone from anywhere can decide to be interested in what you are doing or what you are building because of the work that you are doing in public. So do not underestimate the power of visibility. It is so important. And is there anything else? I think Anita has touched on most of the points that are very important to know when it comes to starting a new project. And it's also important that you have things in place already. So, yes, you want people to contribute to your project, but do you have the necessary documentation, the necessary getting started guide for contributors to actually come in and know what to do? So, you have to be very intentional about letting people know that you want them to contribute to your project. So, are there issues that you think a contributor can work on? Outline them in your let's say GitHub issues, and put the correct labeling, good first issues, documentation, whatever it is that you need help with. Make sure that it is known that you actually need help. If you don't make it known that you need help, I don't think anyone would know where to start to help you. So it is very important that you are very intentional with asking or requesting for help from contributors. And yeah, the make sure you reduce the barriers to entry as well. Even though you're just a small project that is just starting out, these things are also very important. Whether your project is small or big, reducing the barriers to entry are very, very important, because it is the very first thing that contributors see when they join your project. And if it is difficult for them to move past that stage, it will be very difficult for you to be able to retain contributors and for other people to get interested in your project. So all of these things are things that one needs to look out for when they are creating a new open source project.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think that will wrap up us in 6 minutes above time. But I can say how much I appreciate you taking time to just share all this and participate in this. And so I think just as we're wrapping up, three key things that I think people who are listening to this should get out with is that open source is for everyone. No matter your experience, just start small and find communities that support your growth. And secondly, inclusivity and accessibility matter. So this is for maintainers and people leading communities. So make sure your communities are welcoming, safe, and sustainable. And Tilda and Anita they have covered how to do this in your community. Also, they have shared how open source has changed their career paths, has helped them grow skills, and given them the connections and networks. So contributions open doors professionally, and you've had that. So we'll end it here unless any of you have anything to say or to just wrap up the session. But I think we are done. Do you have anything or last words? Parting shot?
Nothing on my
Nothing
end.
else from me.
Okay, awesome. So an amazing thank you to Anita Human and Tilda Udufo for sharing the time and wisdom with us today. Have a nice Friday evening and have a very pleasant weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.